I have taught at Saint Agnes Academy for nearly 20 years, and though the years have been long, I have never known a child quite like Thomas. He arrived last autumn, an orphan from a distant town, with no living relatives and no history beyond what the church was able to uncover. His clothes were old, threadbare, and his eyes, his eyes, were the first thing I noticed. They were far too dark, too old for a boy of his age. At first, I thought little of it, attributing it to the sorrow he must have felt, being taken from his home, his family. But as the days passed, I began to notice something unsettling. He would stare at me in a way no child should. It wasn't just curiosity, it was knowing, as if he had seen things far beyond the grasp of a boy his age. He would sit at the back of the classroom, silent and still, his eyes never leaving me, even as I went about my lessons. When the others spoke, he remained silent. When the other children laughed or played, he would simply watch them, his gaze unblinking, as if he were above it all. It was as though he existed in a world of his own, a world I couldn't reach. The whispers began after that, just soft murmurs in the hallways when I was alone. Sometimes I would hear a child's voice calling my name, only to turn around and find no one there. Other times, I would find Thomas standing in the shadows of the classroom, long after the other children had gone home, staring out the window, his eyes lost in the darkness of the evening. It wasn't until one night, after I had stayed late to prepare my lessons, that I finally decided to confront him. I had passed the empty classroom and noticed the door slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw him, standing motionless in front of the chalkboard, whispering something in a language I couldn't understand. "Thomas," I called, stepping inside. He didn't turn around. His voice, soft, almost imperceptible, continued its chant, repeating words I felt I shouldn't hear. I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "Thomas, what are you doing?" He turned slowly. His eyes, those terrible ancient eyes, fixed on me with an intensity I can't describe. They weren't the eyes of a boy anymore. They were the eyes of something much older, something far darker. "I know who you are, sister," he said, his voice sounding strangely different, not like the boy I had known. It was deeper, more resonant, as if something else was speaking through him. "I know what you fear, what you all fear." I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. "Thomas, what are you saying?" He smiled, but it wasn't a smile a child should have. It was cold, empty, full of knowledge I could never hope to understand. "You are nothing," he said. "A servant, a pawn in the game. But I am the king." Before I could react, the room grew colder. The light from the single lamp flickered, and the walls seemed to pulse, as if the room itself was alive. The shadows in the corners of the room began to writhe and twist, taking shapes I dared not look at. The air grew thick, and I could barely breathe. I tried to speak, to pray, but the words caught in my throat. Thomas stepped forward, his feet barely touching the ground as if he were gliding. "The world will end, sister," he said, his voice now a low hiss, "but not before it is remade." "I will see to that." I ran. I don't remember exactly how, but I ran. My heart was pounding in my chest as I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me. I heard his laughter echoing in the hallway, a cruel, hollow sound that reverberated in my ears. The next morning, I returned to the classroom with Father Matthias, hoping to find some explanation, but Thomas was gone. The desk where he had sat was empty, and there was no sign of him anywhere. The children seemed unaware of his absence, asking me only where he had gone. Father Matthias gave me a knowing look. "Some things," he said quietly, "are meant to be forgotten. But I can't forget. I can still feel his eyes on me, watching from the shadows. And every night, when the wind howls outside the convent, I hear a faint whisper in the dark. Thomas's voice, low and mocking, promising that the game has only just begun.